Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual public information meeting for State Project number 102372, which is the rehabilitation of bridge numbers 00058 and 03563, carrying I-95 and the exit 15 off-ramp over Crescent Street, Metro North Railroad, and a pedestrian path in Norwalk, Connecticut. My name is Rochelle Clark from CHA Consulting, and I am the MC tonight for this virtual public information meeting. We hope that everyone finds the presentation informative and that we'll be able to address any questions or concerns you may have. I also want to thank Paul Sotnick from the City of Norwalk for coordinating with the project team and for helping make tonight's meeting happen. Before we get started with the main presentation, I want to walk through the goals and format for tonight's meeting. We will have a brief introduction and welcoming remarks from Paul Sotnick from the City of Norwalk. Then we will have the technical portion of the presentation, which will include the condition of the existing structure, the purpose and need for the project, and the recommended design, which has progressed to about a 30% level. Following the technical presentation, we will open up the forum to comments and questions. Available to those joining us tonight through Zoom is the option to view captions or subtitles. To turn on this feature, select the Show Captions button or the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Then select the Speaking Language button and then select the desired language. Next slide, please. As part of the Title VI Civil Rights, no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. A link is provided on this slide for additional civil rights information. We would greatly appreciate if you would complete the public survey after tonight's meeting. A link and a QR code are provided on this slide. Links to both the public survey and the civil rights flyer are also available on the project website. A recording of this presentation will be posted to YouTube after the event. Closed captioning, including English translation options, are available on Zoom and YouTube. This slide is the Title VI notice to the public, which states that the Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard to race, color, and national origin in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes he or she has been aggrieved by any unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with CTDOT. This slide has the Title VI notice to the public in Spanish. I will pause on this slide before moving on to the next slide. Some of the goals for tonight's meeting include interacting with the project team, welcoming remarks by the City of Norwalk, introduction of the project team, a formal presentation of the design progress, which will explain the condition of the existing bridge and define the purpose and need of the project, and also provide information about a viable proposal. As I mentioned earlier, design plans are at about a 30% completion level. After that, we'll have an open forum for your questions and answers. To use the Zoom Q&A function, select the Q&A tool at the bottom of the webinar window. The Q&A window will open as seen on the right. Then you can type the question in the text box and click enter and it will submit the question. Questions can be submitted in multiple ways. For the quickest response, please submit questions through the Zoom Q&A as noted on the previous slide. This function will only be available during tonight's meeting. If you would like to submit your questions through email, please use the email provided, dot0102-0372 And lastly, if you prefer to submit your question by phone, you can call 860-594-2020 and leave a voicemail. Please state your name and reference the project number as the reason for your call in the voicemail. The project email, voicemail, and Q&A box will be screened by the project team, and the project team will then read the questions out loud. Questions may be asked at any time during the presentation, but they will be answered at the end. There's also a project webpage where a recording of tonight's meeting will be made available. This webpage will also include information that was explained on how to leave questions and comments for the project team. That website is https://portal.ct.gov/DOT Norwalk 102-372. The question and comment period will be open through March 21st. Questions or comments after tonight's meeting may be submitted until March 21st via email or voicemail. And now I will hand it over to Jody Constant for the technical presentation. Oh, my apologies. At this time, I'd like to introduce Paul Sotnick for introductory comments and welcoming remarks from the town. Paul?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to this public information meeting tonight regarding bridges 00058 and 03563 over Crescent Street, Metro North Railroad, and Oyster Shell Park Pathway. We want to thank the Department of Transportation for investing in the rehabilitation of this critical infrastructure within the city of Norwalk, and we look forward to working with the department and your engineering team to make this a successful project and working to make it with the least impact for the overall public as possible. So we look forward to it, and thank you for inviting us and including us as part of the team.
Thank you, Paul. At this time, I will turn it over to Jody Constant from WSP to present the technical portion of our project.
Thank you, Rochelle. So as Rochelle mentioned, my name is Jody Constant. I am the bridge lead for WSP, and we are the designers for the project for the rehabilitation of bridge number 58 and 3563. As Rochelle has mentioned, this presentation is going to go through details that have been developed so far through preliminary design. So reviewing the project team, the owners of the bridges is the Connecticut Department of Transportation. On the left side of the screen, you can see all of our team members with the department. We've already heard from Rochelle Clark so far. She's with CHA and she is our project engineer. And then lastly, on the design team, Tama Liberty, myself, and Steve George are present here tonight to answer any questions you might have. So this project is located in central Norwalk, where I-95 crosses over the Danbury branch to Metro North Railroad. The Norwalk River is just east of our project, and the interchange with Route 7 is just west of our project. This is an urban area. There is a shopping center to the southwest of our project site, and Oyster Shell Park is just southeast of our project site. There is also Pine Island Cemetery and Matthew Park, which you can see on the screen off to the north. So bridge number 58 and 3563 carry I-95 main line and the 95 southbound exit 15 ramp over the Metro North rail line, as well as Crescent Street and a pedestrian path in Oyster Shell Park. The purpose of this project is to maintain a state of good repair for both of these bridges. Structurally, the needs include addressing deck deterioration, bearing, girder, and substructure deterioration. We are going to upgrade each of those structural elements to have a minimum of a satisfactory condition rating. We're also going to improve the aesthetics of this site by removing any graffiti, and in turn, by addressing that deterioration, will also improve the aesthetics. And since this is a very heavily traveled area with I-95 being carried, there is an overall goal for the project to minimize any travel interruptions. And that's both vehicular, carried by the bridges, and underneath for Metro North Rail. So before we review the existing conditions of the bridges, I wanted to go over some terminology that's going to be used in the presentation. Looking at a schematic bridge here, the abutments are the supports on either end of the bridge. The piers are the intermediate supports. The deck is the concrete riding surface, and the deck is supported by steel girders below. The steel girders sit on bearings on both the piers and abutments. So again, the reasons for this project is to address the structural deterioration of both bridges. There are currently low condition ratings for the deck, girders, and bearings. The photos on the screen here were taken from an inspection that we completed as a part of this preliminary design, which shows the current conditions. So when we refer to condition rating, what that is a numerical scale that helps us define what the level of deterioration for each of the bridge elements. So the scale is shown here. As you can see, 9 would be in excellent condition or otherwise a brand new bridge. Our goal for the project is to upgrade all of the structural elements to have a minimum of a satisfactory condition or a 6 rating. So this table here shows for each bridge and for each major bridge element, the current ratings. As you can see, there's a number of 5s and even a 4 on the bearings of Bridge 58. Again, all of our project scope is aimed at improving that to a minimum of satisfactory. So this display plan shows the limits of the project scope. The areas shaded in orange are the 2 bridges themselves. This is where a majority of the work is going to be completed for the project. You can also see the shaded yellow areas on either side of the bridge. These are going to be the limits of repaving to really ensure a smooth transition from the existing pavement over the bridges, tying back into existing on the other side. So for the project scope, on top of the bridges, we're going to be completing deck patching to the concrete deck. We're going to be repaving the bridges. We're going to be replacing joints at each of the piers and abutments. And we're going to be completing some rehabilitation work on one of the parapets on the exit 15 ramp. Underneath the bridge, we'll be completing steel repairs and painting to the existing structural steel. We're going to be completing some bearing replacements at select locations. And finally, we'll be patching the abutments and piers, concrete patching. Regarding utility impacts for the project, there are overhead utilities that run underneath both bridges. There is a line owned by Frontier that runs along the west side of Crescent Street that's only under the ramp structure. And then there are catenary lines along the rail that run underneath both structures. There are temporary impacts anticipated for both of these utilities. The catenary lines especially will need to be de-energized for any work adjacent to that. And the Frontier line will be temporarily relocated during construction. For underground utilities, no impacts are anticipated as all of our work is going to be above grade, but we are aware of utilities mostly that run along Crescent Street. There is water, gas, electric, and stormwater drainage present there, and there's also a sanitary sewer under Oyster Shell Park. So these will be monitored, but no impacts are anticipated. For environmental impacts, there's one permit anticipated for the project, and that is the Coastal Area Management Review. At this point, I'd like to step through some of the traffic closures and shifts that can be anticipated when the project goes into construction. Starting with Mainline 95 and the exit 15 off-ramp traffic. For these 2 travelways, the temporary impacts include off-peak lane and shoulder closures. And what off-peak refers to is when there is not a lot of traffic. So majority of this work is going to be done at night to minimize impacts. There is an on-ramp to 95 northbound that is carried by Bridge 58. This is going to require to be closed temporarily in order to complete the top of deck work in this area. When temporary closures are anticipated to be at night, and the traffic here will be detoured. This is a short duration for this work. We're anticipating a total of 5 to 10 nights for this closure. And again, it would only be at night. The ramp would be reopened during the daytime. There is a sidewalk carried by the ramp bridge 3563 on the north side. We do anticipate temporary closures for this sidewalk. And Rather than having a detour for pedestrian traffic, a taxi service will be made available to carry pedestrians from one side of the bridge to the other. Moving below the bridges, for Crescent Street below, there's only temporary lane shifts anticipated here. This is a one-way street that is fairly wide, so we don't anticipate needing to have any full closures for this roadway. For the pedestrian pathway at Oyster Shell Park, we're very aware of the public interest and use of this pathway, so we're going to minimize impacts to the extent possible here. In order to reduce those impacts, we're going to make sure that any repairs performed here occur overnight. So that way any closures or shifts to the pathway would be at nighttime. We're going to maintain access to the park via Crescent Street and North Water Street. We are going to replace in kind any fencing that may be damaged during construction, and furthermore, any damages that occur to the pathway or adjacent grass areas will be fully restored at the end of construction. Additionally, any construction activities that might be loud or disturbing will be limited if there's any events in the park, such as the Nice Fest, so that we have limited disturbance to the park events. Lastly, there will be temporary traffic shifts and outages for the Metro North Railroad traffic. Timing of these shifts will be off-peak and anticipated to be performed at night as well. For the closure of the I-95 northbound ramp, I noted previously that this would be detoured when the ramp is closed. The detour is shown on the screen here, and it's approximately 2.5 miles long. Traffic from the south will actually jump onto I-95 southbound, continue on to the next exit, and turn around to get back onto 95 northbound. For traffic traveling from the north, they will use Connecticut Avenue or Route 1 to access 95 northbound. But again, this would only be implemented at night. The ramp would be reopened during the daytime, and we're anticipating about 5 to 10 nights that this would have to occur. For right-of-way impacts, there are no property rights or takes anticipated for the project. We do know that we are going to have continued coordination with the city of Norwalk, especially for the activities in Oyster Shell Park. And we're also going to have continued coordination with Metro North Railroad for any track impacts that we will have. The funding for the project is 100% state funded, and the current cost estimate for the project is $15 million. Lastly, taking a look at the schedule, we've noted today that we have made it about 30% through design. Over the next 2 years, we're going to finalize that design to put the project out to bid in the spring or summer of 2026. The project would then be awarded later in 2026, and active construction can be anticipated starting in April of 2027. The full duration of construction will be 1 construction season, so by the end of the year, construction activities would be completed. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and I will pass things back over to Rochelle.
Thank you, Jody. That concludes the technical portion of our presentation tonight. We will now move into the Q&A forum for your comments and questions. As a reminder, you can enter your questions into the Zoom Q&A window. You can also email the following address, dot.project0102-0372@ct.gov, or call 860-594-2020 and leave a voicemail, and the project team will get that to them as soon as we can. Again, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please do so in the Q&A, the Zoom Q&A. You can also send those questions to DOT project 0102-370372 or call 860-594-2020 and leave a voicemail with your question. So we do have one question. Will there be impacts to commuter rail traffic?
So any of the outages and impacts to the rail lines below the bridges is anticipated to occur overnight. And we're going to work closely with Metro North Railroad to schedule those outages, and they will be present on site with us during that work. So there is not impacts anticipated to commuter traffic, as that would often be during the day, during busier times. We would make sure that we are avoiding any of those busier times for our construction activities.
Okay, we have a second question. When is construction starting?
So active construction can be anticipated to be seen in April of 2027. The contract will be awarded before then, but any work would be behind the scenes. So impacts to the public and to the traffic would start in April of 2027. And again, the duration of construction would be one construction season. So it would be completed at the end of 2027.
Another question. Will Crescent Street be closed during construction?
So luckily, Crescent Street is a fairly wide roadway, and it's also only a one-way road. So we don't anticipate having to fully close Crescent Street for any activities. We should be able to shift traffic to one side or the other, avoiding any activities above. So there should not be any full closures to Crescent Street during construction.
Okay, we have another question. How does the taxi service work for pedestrians trying to use the closed sidewalk?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for pedestrians that would typically travel in this route, a sign is going to be posted where essentially the sidewalk is going to be closed. So where the pedestrian would no longer be able to access the sidewalk, a sign will be posted on site, giving a phone number to a taxi service to be able to call to schedule that ride across the bridge.
Another question has come in. Can you provide, I feel like you somewhat addressed this already, but can you provide additional details about the taxi services that will be provided?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, a sign's going to be posted that would help pedestrians. A sign's going to be posted for a phone call number to be able to call to use that taxi service. And actually, what I didn't say before is that the taxi service will be free. That won't be required for any pedestrians trying to use that pathway to have to pay for an additional taxi service. So that would be covered.
We do have another question. The question is, I believe the NRVT, which I believe stands for the Norwalk River Valley Trail, passes underneath. Would the trail be closed?
Yeah, so that I do believe is carried by the Oyster Shell Park pathway that does run below both bridges. So there is potential for closure of this pathway. We do anticipate that's going to be required. However, it would be taking place at night to minimize any impacts to users. I know when we were on site for our inspections, we saw a lot of pedestrians out there using that path, so we're very aware of how highly used it is. We'll have limited timeframes that the contractor would be allowed to close that pathway. And to the extent possible, we will also shift the pathway away from work so that we could keep it open as much as possible. But any closures would happen at night, and we would also still try to maintain access to the park itself through Crescent Street and North Water Street.
I will wait another minute or so to see if any more questions come in. You can enter your questions into the Q&A window, send an email to the project email, or call 860-594-2020 and leave a voicemail. So we will wait just a little bit longer to see if we have any other questions come in. All right, it looks like that is all the questions for tonight. Thank you everyone for attending and for your participation in tonight's virtual public information meeting. We appreciate everyone's time, input, and questions. As I said previously, we will be monitoring the phone and email address during the comment period, which is through March 21st. A link to the project webpage has been posted in the chat, and we're looking forward to a successful project here in Norwalk. Thank you again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you very much.